It's wrong in my notes. I'm
Alrighty,
sorry.
thank you for that introduction. That lovely introduction.
No worries.
So, our second segment comes from AP News. It discusses how a Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in the United States ruled that gender dysphoria, which is commonly associated with transgender and gender nonconforming people, is covered by the disability law. This could allow for challenges against restricting gender affirming care for people. Unfortunately, it was the result of a transgender woman having to sue a county after she was placed in a male jail. Awful. Cindy, what do you think?
Well, I'm thinking it's about time. France has some kind of similar system where all the long-term afflictions, and gender dysphoria is counted as one of them. You have all your medical expenses taken care of, meaning you pay zero for that. And uh, I think that's one of the reasons why the US so desperately needs a real uh, healthcare system. So I think this situation was pretty horrible. What they did to her was horrendous, and I'm glad it was changed.
Mhm. Mhm.
All right.
Phoebe.
Cynthia, how about you?
Well,
Oh,
I was going to go ahead and just let Phoebe go in because Phoebe already, it's written on her face that she got something to say. So go ahead, Phoebe.
This is the worst excesses of the American legal gymnastics that are undertaken because of the political machinations that are going on in America today. The problem that you've got here is that this is just symptom of a wider ailment. There's no way on this green earth I, as a trans woman, should ever, I mean ever, go anywhere near a male jail. I would be at serious risk of being raped or worse, murdered, simply for existing in these places. And the fact that was even a thing in the first place is an absolute disgrace. This is the worst excesses of America. And the fact that this is a thing and I'm now being called disabled just because I'm a trans person, I find that offensive. But it is the legal gymnastics that are being done to get around these other nonsensical, ridiculous pieces of gymnastics that are being done to enable this bigotry to be foisted upon society. And if this is the way that it's being challenged, that's just as bad because all you need is some lunatic, this critarchy that's running America with these five tossers that decided that they now run the law. If this is where we're going with America, America is fucked. Genuinely
arguably,
fucked.
arguably, it already kind of was, and I feel like a lot of us already think it is. I can't speak for anyone else, but I definitely think we were fucked way before this. But
It's actually fucked her if you want to preface it. But I just want to hip you guys to the lovely thing that's called the American healthcare system that I happen to be bombarded with every day of my life because it's kind of my job. The problem with
My condolences.
yeah, as you should condole me. The problem with things like this is when we're talking specifically about how certain conditions are treated in the American healthcare system. Unfortunately, a lot of those things are state regulated. So, we have our federal government that has our constitutional laws that says things, and then we have state constitutions that fill in the blanks for whatever the federal constitution does not say or regulate. So we have this lovely thing called the 10th Amendment, which basically, paraphrasing, says that you know, federal government will basically bow to whatever the state says if we don't necessarily have a law on the books on the federal level concerning it. So since we don't have a standard of care when it comes to treating gender dysphoria, then the states come up with their own particular ways of how they are actually treating gender dysphoria or whatever type of issue that one may have, health wise or whatever, that's not under that particular enumerated powers. Thank you. So with this being said, I know, like in Illinois where I live, we have a fairly standard of care where we do treat gender dysphoria, but unfortunately it's under that particular guise of it being a disability. But the crazy thing about it is that gender dysphoria was not considered, was actually first considered a behavioral health issue in our DSM, but it was taken out, I want to say, in the 1970s, 1980s, when being gay was also considered not a behavioral health issue. Yes. So, so with this,
here.
yeah. That's like the DSM is like, it goes like, it's worse than the Bible. But so with this being,
Bible, at least they use small
said,
print. At least they use small print in the Bible.
right? But this is how you like read the DSM. What that say? Okay, very good. Okay, I guess this is what you got, right? But the thing about it is that, so at least in Richmond, Virginia, if you actually treat gender dysphoria as a disability, then you can get funding or healthcare coverage so that it can be treated. So how is that treated? That's going to be treated by you being able to get, HRT therapy. You can, and it also can even go into gender affirming surgery if that's what you decide to do. So it's shitty the way that it's categorized, but unfortunately, our system is shitty. I know I talk to my patients every day about things like this because a lot of my patients are transgender, and especially when it comes to navigating the system so that they can get their hormone replacement therapy, and they can also get navigation so that they can actually do sexual reassignment surgery if that's what they decide to do or what have you. Trying to just go through that, especially if they have Medicaid, which is the insurance that is state regulated, even though it's federally funded. Depending on what state you are in, it varies, and it really fucked up. It's very, very much so fucked up, and this is why we do need universal health care at the federal level. But I understand that all of you across the pond and who are more civilized than us got that particular sentiment. Unfortunately, we don't. But go ahead. What were you going to say?
I want to jump in here. I want to jump in here,
please,
because whilst the United Kingdom does have a universal, free at the point of use healthcare system, in the United Kingdom, gender affirming care may just as well be toilet paper. There are waiting lists in the UK over 7 years for a first appointment at a gender identity clinic. The United Kingdom is systemically transphobic in its healthcare provision of trans people. There are roadblocks in the way. It is treated as a mental health condition. It is centralized, and the waiting lists are years and years and years long. And there are doctors who will obstruct the writing of prescriptions, and there are doctors who will obstruct the referrals for surgery. And whilst I may not pay a penny, there is a reason that I paid out of pocket to go and do my transition. And that was because I wasn't prepared to be a 50-year-old when I was starting my transition in my 20s by the time I finished it. So whilst universal healthcare may be this great panacea, you have to make sure that the people running it are not self-absorbed, narcissistic, right-wing bigots.
Wait, hold on. Have you listened to any of our congressional members in the United States lately? Have you? Just saying. We got a problem here.
Well, you've got some people who are on the left. You have some people who are on the right.
Mhm.
And yes, I'm not quite sure how the French do it, but how do they do it?
Hey, go ahead,
Uh,
Cindy. How did the French do it?
the French has, like I said, one payer system where everything is taken into account, but it's still not perfect. Like in the UK, you have some places where you treated very badly. Like when I started, um, when I wanted to start the procedure, I had to see a psychiatrist, and after 3 sessions, she told me that I was mentally ill, and unless she couldn't cure me, then she would allow me to go through the procedure. And so I had to go see another one. But in Belgium, Belgium is completely different. Belgium is the paradise for trans people. There's the greatest team in Europe and maybe second in the world. Uh, it's a pluridisciplinary team.
Hmm.
It's just great. If you can, and yes, it is a real country, a federal country, like a bit like the US. But yeah, just compare. You can even practice sports here as a trans woman.
That's good. That's great. One of the things that I really hate, because that's very similar to how a person can be treated or be able to receive gender affirming care, is, the gatekeeper is the psychiatrist. Um, and again, that can vary from state to state, depending on whatever that state's rules are concerning gender affirming care, or even if they have them, or if they decide just to be completely oppressive. Um, the issue is that, depending on how the psychiatrist diagnoses you, then would determine, and that normally is like when they say gender dysphoria, the way it should be interpreted is that it's not necessarily that you have a mental illness, but it's just that you do not identify with the gender that you were assigned at birth. Therefore, since you do not identify with that particular gender, you should receive proper treatment in order for you to receive, the care that you need in order for you to live a happy and healthy life. But we still have this whole discourse in the United States, and I'm pretty sure it's global, where trans people are not even seen as people, or they're not even like recognized, as far as being able to see them, or even being able to see them as themselves, or even live their truth. I don't know how many times I have gone through different arguments with friends of mine who just want to have this very binary delineation of what gender is. Gender is man, gender is woman, and that is, male is man, female is woman, and that's it. And I'm like, no.
It's
Yeah.
ethnocentrism gone
Why
mad.
can't I be an octopus, right?
Oh,
What? Say that again, Cindy.
Why
So,
why can't I be an octopus?
I personally am an aardvark, but no one actually wants to recognize me as that, and that's real fucked up. But what were you gonna say, August?
so one thing I have to have us talk about, and it's sort of a side shuffle, but it's still related to this. In the article, there was, I think, a quote by the current Texas governor, Greg
Mm,
Abbott,
yeah,
saying
fuck him.
that oh, I got Phoebe all riled up now, for good reason.
I hate
And
Greg Abbott. I hate Greg Abbott.
I don't know what sane person doesn't, but he called gender affirming care child abuse. And hopefully you've seen the news, but if you haven't, Texas just had another massacre, and not only a massacre, but a massacre of children, which I think it goes without saying how abhorrent that is. But the fact that he's calling gender affirming care that has been proven to save lives and make people happier, he's calling that child abuse. Yet he does nothing about literal children being massacred by the dozens. And I can't.
After what happened in Uvalde, Greg Abbott went on television and he said, "Today we saw the worst excesses of a maniacal maniac attacking children. Mate, there's a mirror. You should be looking in it because you are the maniacal maniac abusing children by denying what is a standard of care that is universally accepted medically by anyone who is not a charlatan and a quack." This kind of attack on the existence of people just for being people is the modern equivalencies of what was happening when we had the slave trade. People were just commodities.
Yeah.
People are not being seen as people. People are being seen as political footballs, and they are having their lives ruined by people who do not give a flying bat about this kind of nonsense that's going on. And it just irritates the arse off of me.
We're more than 5 minutes in. You can say flying fuck. Thank you. Yeah, and I agree. Flying fuck. Just go ahead, Phoebe. Just say it. Say it.
And we need to point out the racism of that as well. The fact that if a white person goes and shoots a bunch of literal fucking children while the police stand there and do actually fucking nothing, and then, well, it could have been worse. But then if a brown person does that, they're a terrorist. And if a black person does that, then, you know, they were raised in the ghetto or whatever other derogatory racist bullshit you want to say. But when it's a white man or even a white woman, now it's mental health issues. And I can't.
Yeah. The other thing that gets me, though, is that
No, go ahead, Phoebe, and then I'll chime in.
The other thing when it comes to the level of racism, it doesn't just extend to, excuse what I'm about to say, people who look like Cynthia. It extends to people like me as well, a Jewish woman. As a Jewish woman, it extends to me as well. I may not be a religiously Jewish person, but I do wear a Star of David. And there are some parts of America I do not feel comfortable walking down the street wearing my Mark and David because I don't know if some lunatic's going to target me for that. Mm-hmm. And that is just hand-waved because of all these conspiracy theories that are bandied around that come along with being a trans person as well. So I've had people turn around to me and say that I'm a person funded by George Soros, and therefore as a trans person and as a Jewish person, I must be in his pocket. Oh.
Well, and also that wraps back around. The racism can be tagged back to the transgender confirming care because, unfortunately, minority groups, Black, brown people, any kind of minority, they are more likely to not receive those gender affirming care. And they're more targeted for aggressions and attacks. And so I think this just comes full circle that this is just such a bad problem.
Yeah, and it also, like, this even goes to, like, you know, the whole statistic about Black trans women actually more prevalent to die from murder at 35 years old. You know, that's a definitely real thing, especially when it comes to the intersection of not only being trans, but being Black and also being in a lot of times in poverty because, you know, unfortunately, especially when you're talking about Black LGBTQ people, especially here in the United States, is that they have a tendency to live at or below the federal poverty line. And a lot of that is because not only do they have to deal with the historic portion of racism for being Black, African American, but they also have to deal with the additional caveat of being either queer or whether they're gay or they're lesbian or trans or what have you. And the reason being is because we still have a whole issue concerning how we look and view people, and whether we even want to deem them as human, just because they may not look at themselves the same way that you think that they should look at themselves. Okay. So, I would say that with this particular thing, yes, this is a step in the right direction, because we do at least have a law that says, hey, if you are diagnosed as gender dysphoric, you can get care, right? But I think that it is quite known that we have a long way to go, especially here in the United States, when it comes to what gender affirming care looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and just throw it to my panelists, as far as like just giving our final thoughts, and then we're going to move on over. So let's start with Cindy, then Phoebe, and then August.
Why it was me? No, no. On one hand, I am happy that trans people will receive the care they need in that state. Now, on the other hand, I really don't like the way it happened, because
Yeah.
we've been trying to demedicalize the entire process for decades now, and this is the only way we can get around. That's not the solution.
I hear you. Phoebe?
In short, America is doomed. It's fucked. The sausage has spilled out of the casing and is now lying on the ground for everyone to see. And it's disgusting.
I wish that I really got an inward thought of what you were really thinking, Phoebe. But August.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much just going to say the same thing. I don't really like the fact that it's being called a disability. I think there's a lot of things that need to be fixed with that. But as others said, I am happy that this is a somewhat step into the right direction of a long, long, long road of fixing our entire society. We need to wreck it and build it back up, because it's just horrific at this point.